Do want you to take a look at the agenda, and we're going to do a connection to the Ohio pieces. We're going to look at the research and the meta-analysis behind the 10 mind frames for visible learning by Jon Saphier, and then making student thinking visible and the 24 operating principles of Jon Saphier's. Sorry, I'm trying to work. There we go. So quick connection. Don't want to spend a lot of time. I have a feeling we have all looked at this many, many times. We are actually now 3 years into this strategic plan. After this school year, we'll have 2 remaining, but you know, each child, our future is this shared plan. We wanted to really just focus on strategy 1 and strategy 3, highly effective teachers and leaders, and then teacher and instructional support. The most effective instructional practices are personalized, culturally relevant, and directly engage the student in the experience. So the training today really is going to support those 2 strategies. And the whole child framework, we are all called to educate the whole child in the state of Ohio. And this framework really places that whole child at the center, with district, school, family, and community supporting the needs of that child using a comprehensive approach. Goals for today, your success criteria, if you will. We're hoping to provide an overview and generate interest today. We're going to encourage you and equip you to explain how making learning visible promotes student thinking and learning. You'll be able to describe what visible learning looks like in the classroom. You'll engage with the operating principles in the second part of the session and how to create a safe talk environment. And you'll also be able to determine how to implement the principles into action and see the results in student learning. We do want to kind of preface this by saying this is definitely an overview, as Aaron will probably share later. There is a course through the Research for Better Teaching specifically focused on making student thinking visible. Obviously, there would be a cost associated with that course, but it's a much deeper dive into that. We want to start with an overview. The visible learning movement really begins with the visible learning research, which is the world's largest evidence base on what works and what doesn't to best move student learning forward. Developed by Professor Jon Saphier, visible learning is an examination and synthesis of 1,600 meta-analyses. It's comprised of 96,000 studies involving 300 million students around the world. The research will answer the question all of us want to know. Of all the things that we do as educators to accelerate student learning, which ones have the most impact? You'll see that these strands are woven throughout the research and provide a backbone for evaluation and learning. Today's session is going to focus on the first strand, which is the visible learner, and the third strand, visible teaching and learning. We also wanted to highlight a couple of books. Both of those are sitting on my desk right now, but Jon Saphier has written 2 books, Visible Learning for Teachers, which is maximizing impact on learning, and then the 10 mind frames for visible learning, teaching for success. And he continues, every time I hear him, there are new meta-analyses available that he talks about, and you'll be able to hear him here in a minute if you have not. So let's listen to this expert, Jon Saphier. In this short clip, he's going to present on effective methods for teaching, specifically the top 10. And I've taken a snippet from this very long video, if you will, where he just is talking about those top 10.
So let's go to the top 10. So one of the very top self-reported grades, I ask a student what the grade they're going to expect on a test. They are brilliant at predicting it. which in many senses worries the heck out of me. We know a lot about teacher expectations, but my worry with that one is the student expectation. So often we say to a kid, how are you going to perform? And they choose a safe level that they're going to perform at, and they do. And when teachers say to me, my job is to help kids reach their potential or meet their needs, I say, no, it's not. Your job is to help them exceed their potential. Our job is to exceed that, and we can. And certainly the providing formative evaluation up there is providing formative evaluation to that teacher about how they're going. Let me spend a moment to try and build the story. It's going to be partly about feedback, it's going to be partly about challenge. If I divide up the variance explained, it is the case that about half the variance explained the kid. But short of being a brain surgeon, I can't do much about that. We spend a lot of time in education worrying about that. We like to come up with different school structures so that we can choose the kids we want to teach. We come up with all this crazy nonsense about brains and multiple intelligences and learning styles, which have zero effect. And yet again, another way to label kids. Majority of the variance of what we can control is the teachers. Not as much from the home as many argued. The power of peers, I think, can be dramatic, but we've not used them. Go back to my outward bound example. The effects of schools, if I take two kids of the same ability, it doesn't matter what school they go to. It's the variability amongst teachers that's most dramatic in our system. It's some teachers who do certain things that have powerful effects on kids. But half our teachers aren't doing those things and are not getting those above average effects. My mantra is the visible learning, and that's why we call ourselves the Visible Learning Lab, and that's why I've called the book Visible Learning. Is how can we make the learning visible to the teacher? How can I get inside your mind and hear what you are thinking about what I'm saying? Not me ask you a few questions and picking out the person who knows the right answer. Listening skills are so powerful. And what my whole mantra is, how do we come up with ways to help teachers hear how students are learning? Stop the talk might be a very good starting point. My big messages are, there are certain mindsets that we need to have if we're going to do the things at the top of my chart. And one of the most powerful ones is teachers who see themselves as evaluators. And I go back to that example before about principles. When you ask the question, is this working better than that? What is the evidence that you can have that you are having a 0.4 effect? Now, this notion of teachers as evaluator, I think it's extremely powerful. That's your fundamental job, is to evaluate your instruction and your effects. We've got to get away from the notion that tests are about kids. Remember self-reported instruction. When you give a test in the classroom, it's for you to find out how well you went, who you taught well, who you didn't teach well, what did you teach well to whom. And if you have that mindset, the effects are much greater. Similarly, this notion, it's about the teachers. Now, of course, it's about the kids. But the mindset is teachers can make changes. Teachers have the power to be change agents and can have high standards, have challenging goals, have success criteria, have multiple strategies, give the kids different rather than more, and so on. And teachers who have this particular mindset make a difference. And Carol Dweck and others, and certainly the work we're doing, are showing that the mindset of how you do it is much more powerful than what strategies they use, what teaching competencies in terms of content knowledge they have. It's their attitude. The feedback was so powerful through the top 20 or 30 things in my chart. Take challenge, for example. If the task is easy, 1 plus 1, what does it equal? Me then giving you feedback about that task is pointless because you're going to get it right. Feedback works powerfully when you don't know. When there's an incredible amount of challenge in the task. Let me tell you, the outward bound case, when you give people rappelling off the side of a cliff, they actually seek the feedback, which I don't see in classrooms very often. And so this notion of what feedback is dominating to me. And what worries me is how infrequent it is. And I'm talking about information about the task. There's the challenge versus do the best as a contrast. Teachers who believe their job is to make tasks challenging for kids and to work out what is appropriately challenging are much more effective than teachers who argue that our job is to cover the curriculum and the children have to do their best. I hope you can see a picture I'm trying to paint here of teachers you know who have these attitudes. And it is the case that if you have these attitudes, it requires more passion. And it does require more time and investment. It is so much easier to take last year's lessons out and modify it for this year's class because the kids are kind of exchangeable. It does require a different attitude. The relationships in the classroom. Now, they are important for a very simple reason. You've got to build trust before kids will admit they don't know. So if I said to you, madam, how am I going right now? Now, if I'm going to get what she's really thinking, I'm going to have to build some trust with you. I'm going to have to build a relationship with you. Not only am I going to have to build it with you, I'm going to have to build it with you so that when she says something that is completely wrong or maybe completely accurate but critical, you're not allowed to jump on it. You don't say, oh, she doesn't understand or whatever. So building the trust about the whole class to allow you to express what you're really thinking is what the relationship is all about. It's not I love you and I care about you, even though that helps to get that trust. It is when a student feels confident they can say they don't know. Classrooms where error is tolerated, where error is welcomed, are the classrooms where learning occurs. So this notion of teachers, leaders as evaluators is the theme that I was wanting to promote to you today about what attitudes and thinking I have as a teacher when I go into a classroom. It sounds negative, but the message is, how can I do it better? What aren't I doing very well? And how do I collect evidence that relates to that? And that to me is what evidence-based teaching and learning is about. It's none of us throwing another set of tests and accountabilities at schools. It's none of this about collecting more data because schools are awash with data. The last thing they want is more data. It's about teachers asking and collecting evidence about themselves. Remember what Graham Nuttall's work with the microphones? His argument is 70% of what happens in the classroom a teacher does not see. So all that reflective teaching stuff is just rubbish because teachers are reflecting on stuff about 30% of what happened. The only way reflective teaching works is if you actually have evidence of what happens in the classroom and you reflect on that, preferably with other teachers. Why is micro-teaching so powerful up there? Something we hardly ever do outside teachers' colleges, and even teachers' colleges hardly do it anymore. So this notion of how we can constantly ask about whether there is merit in work and how I can provide evidence that I'm having those effects that are greater than the average ones is what my message is about. And what I'm doing in the last couple of slides is doing what I said to you before. I'm doing the same thing now 2 or 3 times to hope you get the message. This is what I want teachers to be, the active calculating teachers, the multiple opportunities. So that's what I want teachers to do. Have a learning intention, have success criteria, worry about progress. And that's what I want students to do. And so that's my message to you today about how we can go about trying to make learning visible to the teacher, the incredible powers of teachers if they have those mindsets, and how we spend so much time in our education business talking about the things that don't matter and not confronting that which really matters. But let me remind you at the end, I'm not criticizing teachers here. Half our teachers are doing these things. And we need a profession where we acknowledge that, we esteem that, and we privilege those teachers to help all of them in the school to make the difference. Evidence does count. Thank you.
Okay, well, quickly, we'd love a few of you to share an aha or an affirmation from John Hattie's video. So if you would, in the chat, feel free to unmute. Our group is small today. Share a thought.
I don't know if you can see the chat or not, Susan.
I do see Bev's comment that relationships matter. Thank you very much, Bev. And it's great to have you here today. I know you're going to talk later, Erin, about wait time. So I'm trying to practice that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. Know your impact. Erica, challenge the students. Do not accept what they feel is their best. Excellent. Students teach themselves, help students to exceed their expectations, not just meet them. I thank you for all of these. And it just makes me think at the end of his video, when he showed the two slides of the adult and the teacher, the expectations were the same. So in your comments, I feel like we could replace students with even adults and the teachers, and making sure that we are doing that with both groups. Thank you very much for sharing in the chat. We are going to get you talking, just so you know, shortly. Let me stop there. Whoops. Go. Yes, there we go. All right. So we wanted to get to Jon Hattie's 10 mind frames. And maybe you could give us a quick thumbs up if you have heard of Jon Hattie's 10 mind frames. A little thank you, Bill. Anyone else? Aaron? Okay, thank you. All right. See a few thumbs up. What if you have not? Jon has come up with 10 mind frames and arranged them into these, you'll see the 3 green categories, if you will. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into these 10. And Aaron, can you confirm for me how many participants we have?
We have 14.
14. All right. So we can do 7 of the mind frames, because we're going to put you in a break room with a partner and you will read the mind frame that aligns to your room. And there's a little questionnaire at the top of the box. And first, I guess I would like for you to find a resource. There were some questions in the chat around the participant folder, so I did include a new link to that. And hopefully you found the PowerPoint slides. Now, I know someone asked earlier, will we have the slides that you're using? Obviously, there's a PDF in there, but we do understand sometimes the script is helpful that has the link. So we can definitely upload that at the end of the session so that you have access to that as well. But also in your folder, there should be a handout called 10 Mind Frames Hattie. And I believe it's got a number 3 beside it. So in that, there is a page for each of the 10 mind frames, and a shout out to Bill Kafuri for providing the resource that we're going to use for this little activity. So you're going to find the mind frame aligned to your room number. There's a questionnaire at the top, which is kind of a self-reflection. It's going to ask you to kind of think about some statements and how you implement in your classroom. And then there is a vignette that you're going to read. And then what is this mind frame about? And what we're going to ask the partners to do is, just when we come back, we'd like you to share an MVP, the most valuable point that you found from that mind frame. We're going to have about 8 minutes in the breakout room. I figured 2 to 3 to read. Some are shorter than others. I kind of practiced last night to make sure that was enough time. And then you can have, 4 to 5 minutes to have a dialogue around that mind frame. So, Erin, are you going to put them into breakout rooms for us?
I have that.
Perfect.
Let's see. So you want them to close after 8 minutes, you said?
I think so. I think that's plenty of time. And we will, if you happen to finish before that and you want to come back to the main room, that'll give us a trigger to know that you didn't need as much time as we thought. But we really would like you to have a dialogue around the mind frame, after you have read the material about it.
Okay.
So when Erin is ready, we're going to go in there. Again, maybe introduce yourself to your partner and have a little dialogue around that.
Okay, if we're ready, here we go.
Is everybody back? All right. Well, if we could quickly go through the 7 rooms, if we could, and let's start with room 1. Would somebody share with us the mind frame and the MVP?
We had room 1, and our mind frame was that we are evaluators of our impact on student learning. And our MVP for that was that instead of relying just on feelings that lessons went well and that students participated, that we have to use evidence to be able to gauge that their learning was visible.
Thank you. Room 2.
Sorry, I was trying to minimize my screen. So we had, I see assessment as informing my impact and next steps. And what we were talking about is that sometimes, doing that pre-assessment when starting a lesson and then moving into writing, across the content area, because we were talking about middle school history. And using that information, not just standardize, not just the tests, to pull in and make sure that the students are able to do the show mastery of the material. And it's been pretty effective for what we've seen so far.
Thank you. Mind frame 3.
I think I was 3. So I had a great gal, Bridget. Bridget and I were together, and we talked about the similar things that Team 1 mentioned regarding having that evidence to show what our kids learn versus kind of the sit and get model that reminds me of high school teachers. And Bridget's a preschool teacher, so definitely listening to them and learning from them. And then I think we forgot about the MVP.
That's okay.
So sorry about that.
I don't think my partner and I talked about it either.
Okay.
You're not alone, but we had a great dialogue. So.
Yeah, we did too. Thank you.
All right. How about 4, 5?
4. My partner and I.
Thank you.
We were talking about being change agents for the students and mindsets to try difficult things. And my partner shared that it's okay, that we're here to get kids to think it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay that we're learning. We get them to see I tried my best was it really your best? Was it truly your best? What did you do? And then in my 4th grade classroom, I used the myoneword.com website so that to get the kids thinking, what's one word that's going to better ourselves and everyone around us. We use yoga cards and positive affirmation cards to help students gain that inner confidence to try new things, learn new things, but also to be change agents within their homes and their communities. And our MVP was how we're using this COVID pandemic to coach the kids through bumps in the road, difficult times, so that it's a life lesson learned that hopefully they'll take with them forever.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Mind frame 5.
Okay, I'm coming. I had to unmute. Wendy and I were in a group together, and we talked a lot about the challenges, and she's a sub, sometimes a long-term sub, and it is a challenge to walk into a classroom and really not knowing the students well enough to know what is their best and what can they do. Usually, you just have a lesson that's already prepared, and you're just trying to follow those directions. But even in a long-term situation is, what can students do and what can a teacher do to challenge students regardless of their level? And that is a challenge for the teacher to make sure that you're stretching every student to do a little bit more, to identify what they can do, and then take that one step further. And you know, there's a lot of good points in all of these vignettes, and particularly with what we're already doing, and trying to make sure that each student can see what it is that they're doing. And as a teacher, you know that they've reached a new high or they've challenged themselves. And I think that's the key for us as the instructor, is when do we know they've done their best or even gone beyond that? That's kind of an MVP there.
Yeah. Great. How about 6?
I had 6. So this one, my partner and I, we teach very different age groups. She's an intervention specialist for K through 2. I teach 6th grade. So this was all about understanding feedback given to us, and also feedback for the students. So obviously with me teaching middle school, my students can give me a little bit more detailed feedback than her little ones can. But our MVP for this, we said, what makes successful feedback? So obviously we want to have as many detailed feedbacks from our students for us as we can, as well as giving our students valuable feedback, you know, not just the good job, you know, you get a sticker, but valuable feedback was our MVP that we had for this one.
Great. 7. Brittany, do you want to go, or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
We discussed, ours was number 7. I engage as much as in dialogue as in monologue. And we were just kind of talking. I teach preschool, which is different from what Susan taught. But in preschool, I'm seeing a lot of, when I do the turn to talks, sometimes they're struggling with just facilitating that on their own. And we also discussed how sometimes technology might play a part in that, where they're constantly having that entertainment given to them. So they're not actually using their creative thinking process as much these days. So when they're on their own, having these discussions, they need a lot of guidance. And we didn't really pick an MVP, I guess. We kind of got lost in our discussion.
We did. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all for sharing out. And we did not get to 8, 9, 10, but this resource is available to you. I also wanted to mention that the 10 Mindframe books, you can't really see it, but it was on the slide. There is a chapter for each one of the 10 Mindframes that starts with this questionnaire, the vignette, but then it goes much deeper into that mind frame. So if you are interested in that, that is the resource that this handout came from. The last 3, 8 really just talks about informing students. So having that success criteria up front so that they know what success will look like when in their learning. And then 9 is about building relationships. And whenever I hear the word relationship, I immediately think of Rita Pearson. If you haven't seen her, Every Child Needs a Champion, that is just what pops in my mind anytime I hear that. Kids aren't going to learn from teachers they don't like or they don't have a relationship with. So kind of key. And then 10 is focusing on learning and the language of learning. And it does talk about activating prior knowledge. We don't usually come to the learning starting from scratch. There's something we can make a connection to. So that's mind frame 10. And just to kind of close this section on Hattie's mind frame, again, today is an overview. So you can take these much deeper. We could probably spend a half hour to an hour on each one. But mind frames really do direct the way that we think and act. And there is a quote here from Hattie that's in the other book that I showed. And it's, mind frames underpin our every action and decision in a school. The claim is that teachers and school leaders who develop these ways of thinking are more likely to have major impacts on student learning. And I know that we all share that common goal, is to impact student learning. So with that, we are going to give you a 5-minute stretch while we switch gears and switch over to making student thinking visible. Are there any comments, I guess, from the group around Hattie's mind frames before we do move on? All right, let's take a 5-minute stretch and we'll flip over for you. Thank you. Take it away. I'm going to start the recording.
Got it.
I think.
I found where to get it. We should be good.
Oh, yep. I see that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to shift gears over to Jon Saphier's work. And just in my experience, you might not be quite as familiar with Saphier as you are with John Hattie. So they do tie in together very well. Specifically, we're going to talk about making student thinking visible today and Jon Saphier's work with that. And this comes from Research for Better Teaching. It is a professional development organization in Massachusetts. And it was founded in 1979 by Jon Saphier. And they really work with a lot of school districts. And I am qualified to be here today and have information on this and some knowledge because I took a course through rbtteach.com, the Research for Better Teaching. And it was a 5 to 6 month course. If you do want to take this further and go a little bit more in depth, at the culmination of this course, I actually got to go to Boston. And I visited a high school for about 3 to 4 days called Revere High School. And they are a very large high school, a large school district. And within the United States, they have, if not the highest, one of the highest populations of immigration with their student population. So they went, this was probably about 5 years ago, I participated in this. And they went from being one of the lowest performing schools in the state to one of the top performing schools within a 10-year period. And the making student thinking visible and Jon Saphier's work was definitely part of their practice. One thing I want to really hone in on, and that we've already discussed, is that, Hattie brought it up, the foundation is really and truly relationships. And as Hattie said, you're going to hear it through Jon Saphier's work here, that it's not just that relationship with the student where they know you care about them. It's the relationship where that error in the classroom is welcome. I am going to refer to it as MSTV. It's education. Everything in education has an acronym. Here is another one for you. So yes, I got to go there. I got to see MSTV as part of their practice, but it was very clear, the teachers made it very clear that the foundation of what they do is built out of those relationships. And you could see the autonomy of the students. They really took ownership of their learning. They even came to us to teach us as teachers, and it was just truly amazing to see. Okay. So why does making student thinking visible matter? Well, we all know how important it is to create a safe learning environment, not just physically, but socially and emotionally. We talk about that with the trust, where error is welcome in the classroom. It increases that engagement in the classroom. So these are things that we're already constantly looking to do. And we also want to bring our students thinking to higher levels, to deeper levels of thinking, where they can have their own discourse and own their own learning. That is really the whole premises of MSTV, is where the students are really leading the discussion and they can have that rich discourse and bring what they're thinking out for all learners to learn from. And big in education right now is equity, the word equity. It is so important right now that everyone needs to be able to have access to all parts of the curriculum. We have preschool teachers in here. We have a 6th grade teacher. I'm not sure if anyone in here teaches high school, but this really covers all classrooms. I can tell you that a video we're going to watch is a middle school classroom, but I put it into practice in a kindergarten classroom. So while there are differences in the way you do it and maybe the time spent on certain principles of it, it can be applied into any classroom, all discourses and all content for sure. Okay, so this is something you're going to hear over and over, and it's resounding in MSTV. Whoever is doing the talking is doing the learning. And David Guerin is the author of Future Driven, Will Your Students Thrive in an Unpredictable World? Now, I do want to say today might feel a little bit like a sit and get, a little bit opposite of who is doing the talking as to what it should be in your classroom. It is just the nature of what we're doing here. Again, as Susan mentioned at the beginning, this is an overview. This is an introduction into visible learning and making student thinking visible. So I am sort of going to shout at you to do not do as I do, do as I say. We will have some interactions for sure, but this is really just to give you tools or a snippet of some of the tools to be able to take something back into your classroom today, because we all know the most valuable professional development is something you can take and use into your classroom immediately. So I did want to share for you Jon Saphier, because nobody can say it better than Jon Saphier himself. It's just a quick 1-minute snippet off of the RBT Teach website about an introduction to the course.
The purpose of this course is to help us as teachers acquire the skills to create a robust talk environment for students, for all the students, not just some of them, where they are all both challenged and enabled to think deeply, critically, and frequently, and interact out loud with one another in doing so.
The Making Student Thinking Visible course is unique in that there's truly a practitioner's perspective that drives the content of this course. The course includes engaging instruction designed to take learners through a variety of different learning experiences that illustrates the operating principles needed for making student thinking visible.
One of the main reasons I think that making student thinking visible is really important is because it's actually at the essence of great teaching. How do people learn? They learn by doing things and talking about what they're doing, talking with each other, talking with knowledgeable others. And then through that process, they come to understand something that they may have partially understood, misunderstood, or not even known about through the conversation.
If you want to have high expertise teaching be part of your practice and get low performing, low confidence kids to believe in themselves, this is one of the most important skills to have in your repertoire. It isn't just about developing better thinking. It's about making students.
Okay, so there's just a quick snippet from Jon Saphier himself and a little bit of what we're going to go into today. Okay, so in that Google folder that we shared in the chat earlier, you will have a document that is a concept map of the 5 major chunks. That is what it is labeled as. And this is a resource for you. I am going to tell you that today we are really looking at that constellation of teaching skills and those 24 operating principles and the verbal moves that go along with them. Okay. So the embedded values of MSTV say that skillful teachers are curious. We want to know what's going on in our students' minds. We have to know, are they learning that content? And down at the bottom, that is, the main goal of instruction is that each and every student understands the content, and we have to know what they're thinking, what's going on in their minds. So that comes through value of that social interaction and talk. Talk is a powerful facilitator of learning. And in that talk, skillful teachers believe in that necessity of creating that safe classroom environment for being wrong. You're going to hear that over and over throughout all of the principles as we go over them. And of course, we want students to feel respected as capable thinkers, especially, not just even when, but especially when they're confused or have made errors. Because as Hattie said, that's where the learning is, right? And that's where the feedback is, and learning can continue to grow from there. So what is making student thinking visible? Again, it's a constellation of skills. And when it's all put together, you get robust student dialogue. You hear evidence-based student talk at high levels of thinking. The students take responsibility for their own learning, and you will really see that in a snippet of video from a middle school classroom. The teacher is there as a facilitator, and the students really know the processes, they know the routines, and they take that responsibility. They're responsible for listening to each other, they're responsible for teaching one another, and it really creates that climate of support without defensiveness. And again, who's doing the talking? The students. They are certainly talking more than the teacher. I do want to add a note to that. So when the students are talking more than the teacher, obviously it's purposeful and based on the content, and it's rich, deep discourse, but there's a lot of upfront work you have to put into that. And that's what we're here for. And that's, if you choose to take the course, that's what that is really there for. It's to really help you build that upfront. And depending on the grade level or your particular students, each year it could be different. It might take more or less time to build that. So when it is working, when it is in place, who's doing the majority of the talking? Students, right? They elaborate their answers with explanations. They show that they're listening to each other. They are open to admit that they're confused or they don't know. And they also challenge each other's thinking without judgment again. They take their own initiative to explain another student's thinking, and that might include how they made an error. And they take responsibility for each other. So they know when their peers aren't understanding or who doesn't understand and get it yet, and they help work through to get everybody there. Okay, so here you're going to see a little bit of that, where the students are well versed in making student thinking visible. I will say we're going to watch about a 4.5 minute snippet of this. Again, it's a middle school math classroom, excuse me. And so while you're watching, just take note of anything significant or interesting that you notice in this classroom discussion. Maybe it's a teacher quote, or maybe it's a student quote. Maybe you want to write it down or just keep note of it in your head.
Going to look at a problem in which we have to put a border around a pool. We have to figure out how many tiles we would need to put a border around a pool. So what I wanted to start off with is a pool with length of 5. The pool is in the shape of a square. And can anybody tell me how many tiles you would need to put a border around the outside of this pool? Lulu?
I think you need 24.
How'd you get that?
Because you need 4 tiles for each, you need 5 tiles for each side. And then you need 4 for all the corners.
Okay, you want to come to the overhead and use some of the overhead tiles to show me how you were thinking of that? What do you guys think about what Lulu said? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Mike, what do you think? Did you say 24?
Yeah.
Do you disagree? What do you think?
I think it's 20.
Do you think it's 20?
Yeah.
Why?
Because 5 times 4 is 20.
Okay. What do you guys, let's comment on what Mike said. Leo, what do you think of what Mike said?
Lulu also said they had to have the tiles to put on the corners of the thing, so that equals to another 4 tiles to 20, and that makes 24.
Did you get that? So what's different about what Leo said than how you were thinking about it?
He added the corners.
Aha. Tiffany, something to add?
Mike, why didn't you multiply 5 by 4? How you got 4? Yeah, but okay. Well, wouldn't you multiply like length by width? You understand what I'm saying?
You have a comment, Mike?
I just thought that you were thinking of finding areas and I don't know, something like that.
Yes, Mike?
I need it to be 25, and there aren't 5 sides or 4 sides.
So Tiffany's bringing up the idea of area. Length times width. Were you thinking of area?
Yes.
You think you were? But you just said that area would be 5 times 5 would be 25.
Oh wait, no.
Keep thinking about it. Okay? I think you were thinking about something that we're going to talk about anyway. So see if you can make connections. Does anybody else have a comment on the number of tiles you need? Oh, Lily, you're doing exactly what I hoped you would do. Look how she's setting this up. Amber?
Put in the 4 corner squares in different colors to show that the 5 tiles on each side representing the 5 for each side plus the corners.
So what do you think when you're doing this question? What do you think is the part of the border that people might forget? Pascal? The corners. Why do you think people might forget the corners? Claire?
When you look at the drawing, you only see what's inside, and you don't really think about how to create the outside. So you only think about what's inside the square.
What's inside the square in this part?
Yeah.
Okay.
You think about like the outside, but you don't think about if you were to actually create a border, and then you just think that it would be the way it looks or appears, but you don't think about how you'd actually create the outside.
Okay, who wants to add on to that idea? Chloe?
I think people think more about the perimeter.
Aha.
And they don't include the corners because when you count up a perimeter, so I think people like take border and put it with perimeter and don't include the corners because when you think perimeter, you only think how many units across and down and how many are around it, surrounding it, not.
Can you connect your idea about perimeter to something somebody else in here already said? Yes, Mike, go ahead.
He wasn't including the corners, I guess, because he figured if you were just going to border the sides of the pool,
yeah.
If you're just going to border the sides of a pool, you wouldn't include the corner because you don't count that in perimeter.
Okay, so Mike, does that clarify for you what you were thinking in the first place?
Yeah.
So which measurement were you thinking of?
Just 5 times 4.
Which is equal to the area, the perimeter,
the perimeter.
Okay, the perimeter. Lily, would you fill in here the number of tiles needed to border the pool? Just put in the number. So is everybody okay? Going to look at a problem in which we have to put.
Okay. So I'm going to re-share my screen. And I will put the 24 operating principles in front of you. But before I do that, go ahead and either open your mic up and share out anything that you were thinking of or any quote that it was just interesting to you. I'm just trying to kind of gauge where your thinking is before we get into these operating principles. And again, you can drop it in the chat. Okay. I like how comfortably the students share their thinking. Yeah, I noticed that too. Lots going on in the chat here. The students did most of the discussion. Teacher was a guide. You can learn a lot by asking a student to share their thinking, for sure. I enjoyed how the students were able to respectfully disagree and share their own ideas. Yeah, I really noticed that as well. That was huge to me. She didn't tiptoe around the boy's incorrect answer. That was huge as well. She made it apparent, which allowed other students and the boy to think deeper to the correct answer. Yes. Love how the student or how the teacher allowed time for student explanations and discussion. I also do this and find it so rewarding. Awesome. The teacher said to the students, can you connect your idea with someone else's learning? Yeah, I really noticed that too. I enjoyed seeing how the students could verbally work through their thinking to get to the end result. Yes. And the environment seemed safe, yep, and comfortable because the students were not afraid to answer questions. This is awesome. Yeah, you guys are getting it without even seeing it in front of you. I'm going to share my screen again. And we are going to jump right into those operating principles. Here we go. Present. Okay, so what you saw is definitely parts and pieces of those operating principles. And what is in front of you right now are the 24 operating principles. And when I first saw these, when I took the course, I thought, wow, this isn't new information. This all looks familiar. Every single one of them I've either heard of or I have in practice. But what the course really did was help me to dig in deeper and be very purposeful in my lessons and to set my students up for success within these principles. So I'm going to jump over and have you think about, after everything you saw and having a quick glance at those principles, I'll jump back to them, but I want to throw up a poll asking how embedded you feel those operating principles are in your current practice, just overall. So there they are. And here comes the poll. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results with you. Okay, so you can see, I'm so glad that you've all heard of the 24 operating principles. That's very common. And most of us are sitting in that they are somewhat embedded in our lessons. And that's really quite common. And that's sort of what I expected, to be honest, that we're certainly familiar with them and familiar with all of them, or almost all of them, if not all of them. And we feel that we are using those in our current practice. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And we are going to go ahead and get started with getting the conversation started. And we will have a little activity around this. Okay, so that first principle of engaging student thinking, we want to begin that dialogue with a planned question or a statement that's designed to engage that student thinking. A lot of us do this with an essential question at the beginning of a lesson, or just posing a question, as in science. What is the difference between an ionic and a molecular compound, right? So I want you to think about ways that you engage thinking in your classroom. All right, so we have an article in the Padlet that we shared in the chat earlier, and I am going to jump over to that hopefully to be able to show you what that looks like. We're going to click on the green column, 10 critical thinking activities. And whoops, let me go back. Come over to the Padlet. Okay, so this is what the Padlet looks like. So the 10 critical thinking activities are in the green column, getting the conversation started, engaging the students. If you go ahead and open that up and scroll down, there are those critical thinking activities. And this is something that you are going to do independently. I'm going to give about 10 or 15 minutes or so for you to read over that. And what I want you to do is to come back to the Padlet and add on a comment. So I'm hoping that you will use this Padlet, bookmark it as a resource for you for the future for your classroom to be able to come back to and quickly access resources, different ways to engage your students in learning. So again, read the article, go in, pop into the chat your ideas, and when you are ready to move on, just in case I'm giving too much time or maybe not enough time, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. You should be able to do that down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I believe it says, not annotate, but,
it says reactions.
Reactions, thank you. Reactions, yeah, so just give me a thumbs up there, just something so I know you're ready.
Karen, I think sometimes it's just simply asking, what about this is confusing for you?
Yeah, exactly. And just so that they know that it's okay to be confused and we don't all have the answers, that we work through it together for sure.
And sometimes it helps when the adult verbalizes when they're confused.
Definitely. Looks like we got a bunch in the chat. I did miss a snippet of recording there, so I apologize. I don't want to go back and make you listen to me again. All voices and ideas are welcome. Give time for discussion. Definitely. I love that. Make it a teachable moment. Exactly. I will often tell students when I find a topic difficult, yep, I think letting them know that their teacher struggles lets them know it's okay for them to struggle. Exactly. You tell the student, thank you for giving us the opportunity to learn. Perfect. Sometimes I purposefully make a mistake and let them discover and clear it up. Yes. Errors are evidence of thinking. Yes, they are. I tell them that making mistakes is okay and this is how we learn. Exactly. And that is so essential and so important. Okay. All right, so now that we've laid the foundation, we're going to move on to getting started. Okay, so principle number 6, explain. And we all do this. We all want our students to explain their thinking. So we're going to use these moves frequently when we get started with making student thinking visible. You are going to really prompt your students to explain. Get them to explain or elaborate. And when they respond to a question, stay with them for several exchanges. So their response could be right or it could be wrong. But stay with them because that really shifts the dynamic from short answers to them developing the stamina to engage in complex conversations. And if they are wrong, through their talk and through their thinking, they might find their own errors and correct themselves and be able to work through that. So just for example, tell us why and how did you arrive at that? What's your thinking? You know, what's different about this way of thought from that way now? Okay, principle number 7 is restate. So the big thing about this is really getting students to restate what another student said. I know as teachers, I feel like all of us are really good at restating and using that communication skill to make sure that we understand what they are thinking. But again, it's to get everyone in the classroom learning from each other. So we want to get another student to paraphrase what has been said to highlight an important idea. And this is also to check for listening. Are those students engaging? Is everyone participating and learning? I will say it's not a punitive measure hey, I got you a moment. You weren't listening. You're unable to restate. But it really is in order to send the message that everyone's voice has weight and to set the expectation that all students need to listen to one another. It's not just about the teacher's voice. You know, sometimes their ears pop up and their brain really gets going when they hear the teacher's voice, but we want them to be just as engaged and ready to listen when they hear their peer's voice pop up and when they start talking. So really go to another student like, Marie, can you just restate what Josh just said? It really serves a double purpose. Okay, and we did discuss this a little bit earlier with Hattie's work, and it's number 8, turn and talk. So you really want to use turn and talk often in those large group settings because what it does, it gets more active participation for you, especially for those reluctant students, those students who don't want to share out, who aren't ready to take the risks, who are just plain shy and don't want to talk out in the classroom. It promotes speaking and hearing openly and frequently. It gives them opportunities to rehearse their ideas before speaking to the whole group, and it gives them that practice as well. It makes them feel comfortable and ready to do that. So I don't know this year as so much as last year, if anyone is still doing any virtual classrooms. I was just curious if anybody did engage in little turn and talk activities at all in a virtual classroom when they were in that last year, or if anybody still is this year, because a lot of these things, engaging dialogue in the world we're in, you know, today with COVID, there's been so many changes and so many different things going on. It's like, how do we keep students engaged and in a deep discourse if we are virtual? So I don't know if anyone has had anything that they really did in a virtual setting. Go ahead and share that. Because what we're going to do next is really look at a turn and talk article and talk about there are 10 cues and pitfalls around turn and talk. And we're going to go into breakout rooms to do this. That article is in the Padlet. And let me jump over to that just to show you. Blue, getting started, number 8, turn and talk in the Padlet. So if you click on that metamorphosis, the link will pop right open. And it should look like this. And if you scroll down, you can see the benefits of turn and talk, clues that it's time to begin turn and talk, and then a little bit further, there are some pitfalls and tips for facilitation. Okay, so you're gonna be in a little bit bigger of a group for the breakout room. I'm just gonna stop sharing real quick so that I can get those set up. And you're just gonna take a little bit of time, maybe 5 minutes, to skim over the article. You don't have to read it thoroughly. And then have a dialogue around those cues and pitfalls. And then when we come back, we'll share out real quick and we'll have a break. So let me get this going. Okay. All right, I'm gonna set the timer. I'm gonna go with 12 minutes. That way you have maybe about 6 for reading over and 6 for some discussion. If you have any problems or it doesn't work, feel free to jump on back into the main room here. And then, like I said, when we're all done, we'll just share out real quick. There are about 3 to 4 people each room, what you discussed. Here we go.
There were 4, so I left.
Perfect. Yeah.
I figured There was enough in that room that I wouldn't have to stay this time.
Let's pause record. Would like is somebody to volunteer and share out a discussion you had. And if there's somebody from every room, that is wonderful. But I would just like to hear back your discussion. So if somebody wants to unmute and just share with us what you talked about, that'd be amazing.
Aaron, I would like to begin if I can, because I looked on the Padlet and somebody had put up a comment about how easy it is sometimes when you're turning and talking for those discussions to get off topic and so forth. And we actually had a little bit of that conversation in our group. And I'm going to call on Julia, if I can, Julia, if you don't mind, to share out, because she's used this quite a bit, and how she keeps it focused and the structure she uses so that doesn't happen. And maybe we can share some good ideas here.
Well, thank you, Bill. I just shared that I write the question on the board. It's the focus question. And then I give the students a very strict amount of time so they know they have a little bit of time to get right to the bullseye of that question. When we're finished, then as a whole group, we'll write down responses, see what was common, what were possible errors or misconceptions, so that then we do culminate the activity into finding the aha or the spotlight answer.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And, you know, that's a big part of why we're here and can be difficult to do in this overview setting, is to learn from each other. I want to hear from you, and so that we can have ideas and resources and dig a little bit deeper into these, and be more cognizant of them in our instruction. So thank you for sharing. If anyone else would like to share, please do. Okay, let me give you a 5-minute break here. And when we come back, we're going to finish up our principles 9 through 24, and we will finish up the border problem video with the middle school students. All right, I will see you at 10:36. Welcome back. We're going to keep moving here with principle number 9. So now we move into helping with struggle. So here is where our students are struggling, and we want to help them with that. So we want to make norms of interaction explicit between the students in our groups. Just like we set up our classrooms at the beginning of the year with the expectations and the norms, we want to do that for the discourse and discussion in our classrooms. So for example, you would want to set a norm perhaps that when a student is talking and agree or disagree with someone else's talk or thoughts, that they use the word because. So that's an expectation that they would say, because I agree with you, or I disagree with you because, and then go on to explain. So in the Padlet, once again, there is a section for help with, or number 9, help establish norms, and then number 10. So we're going to go over number 10 before we jump over to that. And then we're going to jump back into the Padlet. So number 10 would be active listening. So with those norms, we want to make sure that our students are paraphrasing and using careful listening, as well as us as the teacher. We want to unpack the student thinking, especially when they have a wrong or incomplete argument. We want to make sure that there is a mutual understanding of what the students are actually intending to say. So, for example, I think what you're saying is this. Am I understanding you? So we want to jump over to the Padlet where it is purple, And if you open that up, that explains those establishing norms and active listening with a couple of examples to use. So go ahead. We're just going to take 4 or 5 minutes. When I see them start popping into the comment section under help with struggle, we'll start moving on. And feel free to keep adding on into there. And you can even keep adding on in our session, because again, this is a resource for you since we don't have the time to really share and have that discourse with one another. It's something for you to take from each other. Okay, so hopefully you've had a moment to think through that. And if you weren't able to add something into the Padlet, we have a few in there. You can read over those and think about that for your classroom, because that's what it's there for as well, is to share with each other as well as for you to take. And then we have some in the chat as well. Active listening requires focus and concentration. I see many students struggle with this, which is why we need to do it more. Of course, exactly. That was brought up earlier with the turn and talk, like how difficult it can be for little ones to stay on topic. They're used to being entertained, and practice to stay focused and attending, actively listening for sure. Perfect. Okay, so we're still on helping with struggle. Principle 11 is revoicing. So when your students are grappling with an idea or their explanations are just very general or very vague, we want to revoice to paraphrase or even extend upon their answer. And also what's essential about revoicing is to really infuse that academic language into that and to teach other students to be able to do this as well. So it's great for the teacher to be able to revoice and infuse that academic language, but to get students to the point where they are able to do that for each other. Okay, number 12 is scaffolding. We're all familiar with this in our instruction. Well, guess what? You can scaffold student talk as well and their thinking through the dialogue in the classroom. So when the students are experiencing difficulty explaining their responses, maybe that explanation is vague and they just can't come up with the words, scaffold that thinking. Continue to question those students. You want to allow the pieces that they don't know to surface, and you want to nudge them to build on it. So you don't want to finish it for them or explain it for them. You want to be able to get them to verbalize. So scaffold them into that. So what questions do you ask that engage students to build upon their thinking and understanding? And that is something to think about. I'm not going to take the time to ask you to share out or pop it in the chat, but if you do have something to share, we welcome it for sure. So that's just something to think about, is what are you asking in the classroom that really engages your students to build on their own thinking and their understanding?
Aaron, if I could just, I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to connect here. I had put something in the Padlet, but the more I look at a lot of the things that you're doing and that you've done today, I know at some levels, probably at high school levels and maybe even middle school levels, the use of a Padlet with students to let them see some of the main ideas, and then, you know, the expectation of, do you agree? Do you disagree? Why? And I'd even said something there as far as providing students with either a placemat or an opportunity to stay with a handout to take notes. And when classmates speak or when the teacher speaks, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a question? Are you not sure? Just to help them start to listen more intently, rather than, because we all, I know I do have a real bad habit of listening to reply rather than listening to understand. and then get a deeper understanding. So what kind of tools are available that we can use to try to get students to listen more deeply, and then connect those thoughts to their own understanding, and help it be easier for the teacher to see that as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Bill. I love that you made that connection. The not listening to reply, which is what most of us do, but it's to really understand, listening to understand. It really is about building those communication skills with students for sure. And we're still on struggles because there are 4 principles under that struggle, because we all know that is a big part of learning. And that comes through that persevering and returning, right? So we always want to return to a student whose answer was initially incomplete or incorrect. Ask them to put together the points that were produced throughout the classroom discussion by others. So you start with that student, you want to make sure you end with them. So come back to them, put it all together for us. And then that really helps them be able to go back and go through some of those principles that we already talked about, like revoicing. It shows that they were listening actively, and through that, maybe you are scaffolding their thinking, or maybe some of the other students are helping scaffold that as well. Okay, so we were really thinking about what the students are doing and how they are struggling through. So as teachers, we all know that we have give-ups. Slowing down. I have a tendency, and I'm trying to be very purposeful as I watch the clock, and not internally panic, to make sure I slow down. Because it's just these old habits that we have to relinquish, and we want to slow down so the conversation can have repetitions and restatements, right? Because we all know that it takes more than hearing something once. We'll give directions and half of the class won't hear them. We'll give directions 2 times and half of the class still won't hear them. So it's all about repetition and restating and practice. So take that time and slow down. We want those answers in order to hear things more than once and have the opportunity for students to be able to put their thought or put those ideas and thoughts into their own words, because then we know they better understand them. With this one, I always think about what a struggle it was to be a classroom teacher. And we know we never have enough time, no matter what we're doing. There's just not enough time. We have so much to do. We have this lesson we spent so much time planning out and perfected, and it went so beautifully in our minds. And then, we work through students struggling. And in the back of my mind, I was always panicking. I've got to get through this. But I'm telling you what, lay that down, lay that aside. It is so much better to go deep and to only get a small portion of that lesson you have planned out, and to have that rich discussion, that rich engagement. Students are understand deeply. They're really getting the content, than to work through all of the content and have them just skim it, or maybe just half the students got it. Or, you don't want to leave anybody behind. Here's that equity piece. This is where it really digs in, and you're reaching those students that struggle through all of these pieces. It's all weaved in together and intertwined. But take that time, really be purposeful to focus in. If you take nothing else out of today, it's dig deeper, slow down, and don't worry about everything else. It will come. It will come. What else do we have to give up? Well, what have we been talking about? We've been talking about students struggling and how important that is, students being wrong, students making mistakes. So as teachers, we have to allow that. That can be hard too. Don't rescue your students. That's something I was always guilty of. And I am a blabber. I talk a lot. And I always want to interrupt and rescue people. And that is just awful. So here I am, engaging with an intent to reply, not to understand and listen. So don't do that. Lay that aside. I have to work so hard on that. We want to stick with them, just like we talked about with principle number 13. Start with that student and end with that student. So we are cognizant of it on our side. And listen without commenting as they talk through their ideas. Again, this is something I have to work really hard on, and maybe it's easier for you. Yet another give up. Sort of the same idea of coming in and rescuing, right? Allow that struggle. Don't answer for yourself. But if a student is coming to you asking a question or in the middle of a lesson in the group, see if another student can answer it. Don't just answer it yourself as the teacher. Give it up to your students. Let them teach each other. Let them take ownership. Prompt them into, what do you think the next step will be after what he just said? Your students aren't always going to want to answer for each other until they get into that practice. So you really want to call on them, encourage them. Hey, so-and-so, how would you answer that? What do you think about it? Okay, and then number 17, we want to leave students with cues to puzzle and ponder over. And this comes back to persevering and returning with the student. We want to make sure that we revisit the student to see what they came up with. And I recall a snippet of a conversation earlier about making a connection. It definitely happened in the border video. You could hear the teacher saying, and the students knew right what to do. I'm going to come back to you later and see if you make a connection there. Okay, so here we are getting the students to interact with each other. Principle 18, agree to disagree. Invite students to agree or disagree with an idea that someone shares, and not just agreeing or disagreeing, is to really explain their thinking. And the big part about the agreeing and disagreeing, I think for the most part, a lot of us do really well on getting their student to explain their thinking or their reasoning why. But then is really coming back and using some of the other principles to compare. I disagreed. I'm explaining my thinking. I'm able to explain your thinking. And then how does that compare? This is really why. And adding on. So this ties right back into that explaining and adding on to that agree or disagree, or maybe it's just having them comment on another student's thinking. What do you think about Mike's interpretation, or who has something to add on to that? Okay, and number 20 is to compare thinking. So here, this is tying into those principles 18 and 19 and 20, where we are agreeing and explaining and adding on, comparing their thinking. What is the similarity and difference between the two ways of thinking or approaches? Again, all these are interweaving and intertwining with one another. And when you really get it out there and get the students in the practice of doing this, it really flows smoothly, and they are able to do all of these points on their own and interact with one another. And then surface discrepancies. You want to ask questions to surface those discrepancies, point it out, and then leave the students to think over it. So how could that be if so-and-so, or what do you think might be going on there? Okay, so principle number 22. So when after reflection or struggle, the students that change their opinion or answer, you want to ask them to compare the two lines of thought that led to their different answer. So again, it's tying into that comparing. And again, you're going to begin with the student and you're going to end with the student. So what was different on this try compared to the first way you did it? How is that different from the way you previously thought? So it's really verbalizing that thinking, getting it out there. Okay, and the last two really go together. I've made mention of infusing academic vocabulary. We are going to hit the Padlet one last time. You want to infuse academic vocabulary and record academic vocabulary, of course. So we're going to share in the Padlet how we seize the opportunities to infuse academic vocabulary into that language of thinking and dialogue, and ultimately that culture of the classroom. So you are using that academic vocabulary as a teacher, and it becomes the culture where the students are using it. And that's really the goal, is to get those students in the use and in the habit of that vocabulary. So, you know, for example, yes, and what you just did is an example of analysis. There's your academic vocabulary. All right, so again, we're just going to take about that 4 or 5 minutes, because I want to make sure we have time to finish up our video. Just add on to the Padlet how you infuse and record academic vocabulary in your classroom. And it's going to go under the yellow section, very last section. Just very simple. And it is totally okay for you to come back later, come back after the session and add to this Padlet. It is totally okay for you to take. Okay, some of us can be givers and some of us can be takers right now, and that is completely okay. So I'm going to set a timer and give you think time. Yeah, so thank you so much for engaging on the Padlet and within the chat. All of your knowledge is so valuable, and your ideas. I won't go through and read everyone. I'll allow you to do that. I'll try to hit the chat here real quick. Oh my goodness. Yep, being aware that children have short attention spans when it comes to listening to others, especially those little ones for sure. When conversing about content, academic vocabulary can and should be infused and encouraged, but giving students time to use their own dialects and verbiage is just as important. I love that. I love that you brought that up and brought, you know, that's another equity piece, because it really does, like you said, show the diversity within the classroom and can lead to learning more about synonyms, etc. Amazing. I love that thinking. My brain didn't even go there. But no, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. So many great ideas. I feel like we are just rushing through this, and you all are so knowledgeable about this already. But I don't want to take up any more of your time than what I have to. So we are going to finish up with the teacher in the middle school classroom and the border problem. I'm going to tell you now, it's about 8 minutes, because what I want to do is I want you to really see it in action in the classroom, more than just a snippet that we got at the beginning. And I want you to see what it really looks like and be able to pick out, now that we've gone through it quite quickly, what principles you see in action. If you want to throw it into the chat box, great. If you just want to keep it in your brain or even share out after, that's wonderful too. So I'm going to go ahead and play that again. It's going to be about an 8-minute section. It's such good stuff. And this, I can tell you this, that if you would choose to do the course, I did that course online, you get to see amazing teaching like this. And then, of course, the feedback and talk from Jon Saphier about what to look for, what you saw. So it really is amazing teaching.
So I want to just clarify some of the things that we've already sort of gotten into. What's the area of, Lulu, would you stay and just continue to fill in these things? Thanks. What is the area of the pool? Not the pool with the border, just the pool. Adam? 25. What do you guys think? Put your hands up if you agree. Anybody disagree? You want it? Can someone, I want you to explain how you got that. well, you're asking for the area of the pool, and area is like times width, and they're all the sides are 5, so you need 5 times 5 equals 25.
Okay, we agree? So you want to put that in? Does it matter which one we call the length or which one we call the width here? How come? Ready?
They're all the same size, so it's just like side times side.
Excellent, it's just like side times side. Okay, how about the area? When we write area, what do we have to put? If we just write area of pool equals 25, is that 100% correct? What do we need to add on?
Centimeters.
Are we in centimeters? Do we know what we're in?
No.
So what could we say? What could be a general thing we could say? Natalie?
Units squared.
Let's just put units squared. Good idea. All right, how about the area of the pool with the border? So the area of the pool and the border together. What's that going to be? First of all, is it going to be greater or less than the area of the pool? The area of the pool with the border going to be greater or less than the area of the pool? Kristen?
Greater.
Okay. So now what's it going to be?
36.
How'd you get that?
Because I counted the amount going down and the amount going across on the border, and it was 6.
It was 6?
Yeah.
You want to come up and count for us? Okay. Let's watch and see if it's What'd you get?
7.
7 and 6? Okay, let's think about that again. Show us how you're counting. Point to each square that you're using and count out loud so we can hear you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, so let's stop right there. The length of this side on the top is 7 units, right? Now you want to take the length of this side?
1, 2, count, stop right.
What do you think? Is that part of that side?
Yeah.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So what's the length of this side? So how are you going to find your area? If you need help, you can ask somebody in class.
That would be 49.
What do you guys think? Would it be 49? Okay. So you want to tell us what you did the first time that was different than how you figured out the second time?
Oh, well, when I was looking on there, I guess I got mixed up. Like, I counted 1 yellow for 2. Like, from far away when you counted, sometimes skip.
Okay.
So I guess I skipped and
Okay, so you just miscounted. You just skipped 1? Okay.
And then I didn't count it this way, but then I didn't count this one for going this way.
So you only counted one side of this red corner one, not the other side of it when you were going down?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Natalie, do you want to add on to that? Yeah, I got the same answer by adding 24 plus 25 because you knew that there were 24 tiles around the square of 5 by 5. Yeah. So 25 plus 24 is 49. So I agree with Kristen. Where did you get the 24 from? The 24 is the number of tiles around, like the border around the square in the middle. What do you guys think of that? Can somebody paraphrase Natalie's thought? Say it in another way clearly. Claire?
Natalie found the outside of the inside pool, and then she took that, and that was 24. She counted the number of tiles, and she got 24. And then she took the outside amount of tiles needed to build the outside pool border, which was 25. And she added 25 and 24, and she got 20 and 49.
Okay. Shayna, do you want to say something about that? I thought you already had it before now. No? Okay. She answers my question. You go ahead and say it your way.
No, I'm just gonna add why Kristen would have miscounted, but
go ahead.
No, it's
okay. All right. So we figured out. Yeah, Tiffany.
Okay, I have a question. With the since you know that the length and the width are the same, 5 and 5, would you still use that to see if they were the same? Like since the length with the border, 7 and 7, because he put 7 and 6, would you still use it to think that it's the same length and width?
I'm not 100% sure.
No, because he made a mistake. Kristen made a mistake and said that the length and width were 7, 6.
Yes.
He could use 5 and 5 just to say that the border would still be the same length and width, 7 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, it's hard to explain.
Do you want somebody to try to add on?
Yeah.
I think that what Tiffany is saying is that you know that the pool is a square. So, and that since it's a square, the sides are all the same, 5 and 5. And so you know that if the pool is a square, then the tiles would have to make a square too. So you know that the sides couldn't be 7 and 6, they would have to be 7 and 7, or or like a number that's the same.
Okay, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so he couldn't have made a mistake.
Right. 7 and 6, he should have thought, well, it's a square, so both the numbers have to be the same. Can I go back to Natalie's way for a second? I think I just finally figured out what you were talking about. You were saying that if you know the number of tiles you need in the border is 24, and you know the area of the pool is 25, you can add those two things together. How did you know that the number of tiles in the border was the same thing as the area of the border? Because in order to add them together to get the total area, you have to think they're both area.
Right, well, I sort of looked at the diagram. It's filling up a space, it's taking up a space, so it was taking up that area of like the border.
So each square has a measurement of what?
1 unit.
By
1 unit.
1 unit by 1 unit. So one square here, one tile, has an area of 1. That's an excellent strategy that Natalie came up with when you're going to do your group work. I want you to keep in mind this idea of dividing the area of the whole into different parts and seeing if you could do anything with that.
Okay. Perfect. So there was so much going on in that video. If anyone has any thoughts, I know we had a lot going on in the chat box. There was a lot going on in that classroom, and a lot we could sit and talk about all day. Yeah, students recording responses and showing the work, engagement, safe learning environment, different ways to get the same answer. Yeah, I like how the teacher said, well, say it your way. That was great, and all the extensions with it. Okay, so I'm going to use my wait time. If anyone wants to share out or add anything more into the chat, please do. I do want to say before we finish up and get to the evaluation, I really hope that you can take something from today, a part that really stuck out and stuck with you, and take it back to your classroom. And you know, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with any new information you gained or something that reinforced, to dig in a little bit deeper or be more intentional and more purposeful about getting your students to talk. And again, preschool students, doesn't matter the age, all the way through high school, you might have to spend a little bit more time, but if you are purposeful and intentional, yeah, it'll pay off. So yeah, if anyone wants to share, I'm gonna.
Okay, Erin, if you want me to jump in here, we have created a tool for you to use because, as Erin said, we definitely don't want you to leave here without an action plan on next steps. So I actually have created an action plan document, and I've thrown a link to that in the chat. I've also now linked it in the agenda document in your participant folder, and it's just a graphic organizer where you can choose. I put 3 different tables on the tool where you can choose some operating principles, really jot down your thinking around that. And then what is your action step? How will you put these into practice? And as it says on the screen, tomorrow, next week, next month, how do you see these coming alive, if you will, on a deeper level in your classroom? So that tool is available to you. I do have an email ready to go out to all participants, both the ones that were here and the ones we aren't going to see this afternoon since we had to cancel that session. And all of these links will be available to you. And we really do encourage you. Some of you have colleagues that are here with you from your districts. We encourage additional conversations and dialogues around this with your colleagues to see, our thinking always is stronger when it's together. Erin knows, Bill may know, I do my best thinking out loud, and it's usually hearing something that someone else said, and it creates a thought in my mind. So let's beg, steal, and borrow. That's what educators do. And then Erin, I think our very last slide is around the evaluation.
Yes.
And in addition to that, we're going to throw a link to that in the chat. This is how you receive your certificate of attendance for today. And it is also going to be in the email, but we really do want your feedback. It really does help us to improve our practice. So please take a few minutes to fill that out for us and be thoughtful in your feedback. We do appreciate it. That's the only way we can get better, is if we know what it looks like in your seats and from your eyes. So I'm going to say thank you. Erin, I don't know if you want to say more. We really do appreciate your time this morning. We truly do know how busy everyone is. And I know we had some people that had to leave early for other meetings. So thank you for being here and sticking with us this morning.
Yes, definitely wholehearted thank you. I'm so thankful you were able to take time out. I know how busy things are, as Susan said, and I just really appreciate you being here and appreciate that feedback as well, and all the way through the session for all of your engagement. So thank you, and I really hope you have a great afternoon.